Hello and welcome to The World Today, everyone. I'm Richard Nta in Nairobi. Let's begin with our top story. A 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon has taken effect after their talks in Washington earlier this week. Celebratory gunfire rang out across parts of Beirut, but the truce remains fragile. Early on Friday, the Lebanese army accused Israel of ceasefire violations, including intermittent shelling of several villages in the south. Israel has not commented on the accusations. The Israeli military says its forces will remain in southern Lebanon despite the ceasefire. Israeli attacks on Lebanon have been a sticking point in peace negotiations between the U.S. and Iran. U.S. President Donald Trump has expressed optimism that the Iran war could be nearing an end.
This news all coming from President Trump via social media, that he'd had excellent conversations with both Lebanon's president and Israel's prime minister, and that in order to achieve peace between their two countries, they'd agreed to a 10-day ceasefire. And he seemed optimistic that the ceasefire would then move to a negotiated peace, with both leaders potentially visiting the White House, he said, over the next week or two. Trump also said that the second round of direct talks with Iran is likely to be happening this weekend. And he said that Tehran has now agreed to almost everything, including to hand over its nuclear dust.
Iran wants to make a deal, and we're dealing very nicely with them. We've got to have no nuclear weapons. If we do, that's a big factor. And they're willing to do things today that they weren't willing to do 2 months ago.
And remember, Israel's bombardment of Lebanon has become a major sticking point in the US-Iran conflict, with Tehran demanding that Israel has a ceasefire with Lebanon. That could help to smooth the way for a US-Iran deal.
The 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon has been welcomed around the world. European leaders have called for its full implementation and urged efforts towards lasting peace. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says all sides should abide by the agreement. Nations in the Middle East, including Egypt, Qatar, and the UAE, have expressed hopes for de-escalation. Iran has welcomed the ceasefire, saying it was an understanding reached with the U.S. and mediated by Pakistan. The Arab League has called for serious negotiations to secure a sustainable ceasefire. Before the ceasefire kicked in, Israeli forces struck the last bridge over the Litani River in Lebanon South. Our correspondent Adel Al-Maroui filed this report from the scene.
Israel has bombarded one of the main and remaining bridges that crosses the Litani River and goes into Tir, the southern Lebanese territory. This is Al-Qasmiya Bridge. Up until Wednesday, it was operational. On Thursday morning, an airstrike targeted the bridge, bombarding it completely. And with that, it means that Tir, one of the main cities south of Lebanon, is now completely isolated from the rest of the Lebanese mainland. The bridge was used to help passengers cross, food, medicine, and even UN troops and supplies for the UNIFIL forces south of the Litani River use this bridge to keep the supply flowing for their troops here. The strike has created kind of a panic among the residents here who do not know how to interpret these attacks. Is it to prevent the return of hundreds of thousands who have been displaced from going back to the southern territories? Is it to create a wider buffer zone or to take over the territories right south of the Litani River? It's a developing story, and it will be clear what is the Israeli forces planning. But people here are worried. They're isolated and they have no idea how they can reconnect to the mainland or head north if they want to. This is Adel Al-Maroui, CGTN from Al-Qasmiya Bridge in Tir, south of Lebanon.
Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has met with a Pakistani delegation led by the country's army chief, Field Marshal Asim Munir. Iranian state TV says Pezeshkian has expressed his gratitude to Islamabad for mediating talks between Iran and the United States. Munir is an important figure in Pakistan's mediation efforts. His visit to Tehran aims to prevent a renewal in fighting after talks in Islamabad ended without a deal. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has warned that U.S. forces are ready to restart combat operations if Iran doesn't agree to a peace deal. Washington has pressured Tehran to sign a deal, enforcing a blockade on all ships entering or leaving Iran.
If Iran chooses poorly, then they will have a blockade and bombs dropping on infrastructure, power, and energy. And at the same time, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and our friends over at Treasury are launching Operation Economic Fury as well, maximizing economic pressure across the entirety of the government. To Iran, choose wisely.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says the U.S. is preparing to ramp up economic pain on Iran, calling it the financial equivalent of the bombing campaign. He says countries buying Iranian oil or holding Iranian money in their banks will also be hit with secondary sanctions. Washington has denied formally requesting an extension of its ceasefire with Tehran, which expires on April the 22nd. Iran has criticized the U.S. sanctions threat, calling it economic terrorism and state-sponsored extortion. The UN General Assembly has held a procedural meeting after the Security Council failed to adopt a draft resolution on reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Chinese permanent representative to the United Nations, Fu Kong, says Security Council actions must focus on de-escalation and should not legitimize unauthorized military operations. China and Russia vetoed the resolution on April the 7th, triggering a mandatory assembly debate. Fu says China understands Gulf states' concerns, but warned against steps that could escalate tensions. He called for safeguarding navigation in the strait and urged Iran to restore normal shipping. He also cautioned that increased U.S. military deployments and targeted blockades are dangerous and irresponsible. Fu says the Hormuz issue is a spillover of the broader conflict, stressing that only a comprehensive ceasefire can ease tensions. He urged all parties to uphold ceasefire arrangements and pursue dialogue and political solutions.
The
situation has reached a critical stage between war and peace. A window for peace is opening. The priority now is to prevent a return to conflict and sustain the hard-won momentum for ceasefire and talks. This serves the fundamental interests of the people in the region and meets the shared expectations of the international community.
Turkey is grappling with its second school shooting in 2 days. 9 people were killed and 20 others wounded in the attack on Thursday. Police say a 14-year-old suspect had used a photo of a U.S. mass shooter as his profile picture on social media. The father of the attacker, a former police officer whose weapons were used, has been arrested. A nationwide review of school security is now underway. Michal Bardavid reports.
It was a day marked by grief and frustration in Kahramanmaraş, where funerals for the school shooting victims took place and the city came together in mourning. Families clung to coffins during prayers, many of them in tears.
Sadly, we lost a child of our colleague. We are in indescribable pain. I hope security measures will be in place in schools and that our students can come safely, because right now we unfortunately don't even have the strength to go to school.
At a condolence house, Mustafa Kazıcı mourns his 11-year-old daughter, Suranur. He says she was among the first to be shot.
Our pain is great. These may sound like familiar words, but they are words that truly reflect this moment and what we are going through.
Mustafa, also a teacher, describes his daughter as full of light.
My child was radiant, tall, and beautiful, a gentle child, always smiling. Whenever she had something sweet or nice to eat, she wouldn't eat it without first offering it to me. She wouldn't speak without saying "Daddy" first. I had 2 children. One has become a martyr. Now I have 1 left.
This is the school where the shooting took place on Wednesday, and more details are now emerging. As the attack unfolded, some students were seen jumping from the second-floor windows to escape. And there are also reports that the math teacher that was killed, Ayla Kara, shielded her students with her body, saving lives.
Kutay, a student, says he arrived shortly after the first shots and is still shaken by what he saw.
I felt like it was a massacre. I was scared. I kept thinking, what if it had been my sibling? What if it had been me? What if it had been my friend? What I would have done.
Amid the grief, Mustafa is also calling for stronger security measures.
There must be a police officer at the entrance of every school for security. Just as you cannot enter shopping malls without going through X-ray screenings, I believe the same should be implemented at schools. Children's bags should be checked as well.
The government says it plans to introduce tighter school security, increase inspections, limit access to weapons, and expand psychosocial support. But for families here, no measure can undo the loss as they begin to face life without their children. Michal Bardavid, CGTN, Kahramanmaraş.
Malnutrition has become a growing and often overlooked issue in the United States. Deaths linked to malnutrition have been soaring, with nations' elderly particularly affected. Edith Tiansan reports from Los Angeles.
Malnutrition is rising rapidly among senior citizens across the United States, driven by food insecurity, fueled by limited incomes, mobility challenges, and lack of access to nutritious food.
So what older people told us was, I pay for my housing before I pay for food because I can imagine going without my next meal, but I cannot imagine not having this roof over my head. So as other expenses go up, it really takes a toll on the availability of funding left over to pay for food. So when older adults don't have enough money for food, they make do. They eat things like ramen noodles or frozen dinners from the dollar store. And those might be inexpensive calories, but they're not very nutritious calories.
New data from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention shows malnutrition deaths have increased sixfold in just 10 years, making it one of the fastest growing causes of death among older Americans, especially people aged 85 and over. Many live in so-called food deserts, areas with little or no access to fresh, healthy food.
This community has a food desert. There's like one grocery store within a certain mileage, and otherwise there are convenience stores which usually sells processed food.
Food banks and pantries report longer lines and rising demand, with some struggling to keep shelves stocked. For seniors, the barriers go beyond cost.
Loneliness and isolation contribute to food insecurity. In fact, all mental health problems tend to contribute to food insecurity. So we're seeing older people with anxiety, depression, loneliness, isolation, and also cognitive impairments. All of these make it more difficult to get your hands on the food, to prepare the food, and to consume the food.
And despite this alarming trend, future data may be harder to track after the U.S. Department of Agriculture announced it will stop collecting and analyzing food insecurity data. It is Tianshan, CGTN, Los Angeles.
Well, that is it for this edition of The World Today. I'll be back shortly with more news from the continent in Africa Live. Thanks for watching. More than 30 U.S. deportees to arrive in the DRC by Friday. Denis Sassou Nguesso sworn in for 5th term as the Republic of Congo president. And the UN says Sudan is abandoned as humanitarian crisis worsens 3 years on. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. Coming up in business, Kenya seeks World Bank support to cope with economic aftershocks of the Middle East conflict. And in sports, World Athletics revokes 11 transfer of allegiance applications to Turkey, including 6 Africans. Once again, a very warm welcome to Africa Live. We begin in Nigeria, where gunmen have abducted secondary school students heading to university entrance exams in central Benue State. And that's according to the region's governor, Hyacinth Alia, who added that other travelers were also missing. He did not specify how many were taken or say who was behind the attack, but local media reported that 17 students were missing. The governor, however, stressed that security agencies had launched a search and rescue operation. This is the first reported student abduction this year and comes as the country is grappling with a complex security crisis that has seen mass kidnappings in several states. And now to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is set to receive deportees from the United States this week, according to multiple sources speaking to Reuters. The deportation is part of a U.S. initiative to expedite migrant removals through agreements with African nations. They are primarily from Central and South America, according to one source, and U.S. court documents. Sources familiar with the matter said there would be between 37 and 45 deportees. The deportees, expected to arrive by Friday, will be housed in a hotel near the airport in Kinshasa for 10 to 15 days, though their fate afterward remains unclear. Sources say those arriving this week will receive assistance from the UN International Organization for Migration. Although the IOM says it is not involved in the deportation process, it can provide post-arrival humanitarian aid if requested by Congolese authorities. Chris Maringa is in Kinshasa and joins us with the very latest. Chris, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us. Chris, what do we know about the arrival of U.S. deportees?
Yeah, so Richard, according to a government official I spoke to who declined to be named because of the sensitivity of this matter, the deportees arrived in Kinshasa earlier this morning, a couple of hours after midnight. And he said that there were no journalists who were allowed to cover their arrival. So the government is trying to conduct this in a very discreet manner, because this whole deal between the DRC and the U.S. has sparked a lot of controversy here. There are people, opposition members, and some in the civil society who are saying that the government should come out clean, be very transparent about what exactly is entailed in this deal, how long these people are going to be staying here, and what is in it for the DRC. The government hasn't disclosed those details yet, and so there's been a lot of, concern by the Congolese people. So what we know right now is that they're already in the DRC, but we're not sure about where exactly they're staying, because the government has not divulged these details yet. Richard?
Can you talk to us about how the government or Kinshasa is prepared for them? How prepared are they for them?
Well, according to a statement that was released by the Minister of Communication last week, he said the government is really prepared. It has put these accommodation areas, hotels, on the outskirts of Kinshasa, where these people are going to stay. They're saying that under the deal with the U.S., the United States government is going to foot all the costs, accommodation, feeding of these people who are here. We are told some of them are from South America and others from Central America. And we also heard about a number of 37. Some people are saying 37, others are saying more than 40. So we're not very clear about that. But the government said that this is a temporary measure and that it's going to be carried out in accordance with international law. and that they will ensure that everything is done in a very transparent manner. But many people in the opposition and civil society are asking for this deal to be made public because the DRC has issues, about citizenship. Many citizens in the DRC do not have national IDs. They haven't been rolled out by the government yet. So they use voters' cards issued by the Electoral Commission. And so there's concern that some of these people might come here and then live in the DRC and claim to be citizens. So that is something that has really caused a lot of unease in the DRC. Richard?
All right, let's leave it there for now. Chris Ochemringa speaking to us from Kinshasa. Thanks for that. The Republic of the Congo President Denis Sassou Nguesso has been sworn in for a new 5-year term. He pledged to uphold and safeguard the authority of the Constitution and to ensure peace and justice for all citizens. CGTN's David Mbithi reports.
The inauguration ceremony was held at Kinshasa Stadium in the nation's capital, Brazzaville, on Wednesday. A festive mood filled the 60,000 capacity complex, which was packed with supporters of President Denis Sassou Nguesso.
We are here at the Kinshasa Stadium to welcome our president, our patriarch, President Denis Sassou Nguesso.
Because he's my president, I love him very much. I am proud of him.
Sassou Nguesso was re-elected president in mid-March after garnering 94.82% of the vote. In his inaugural address, he reaffirmed his commitment to firmly maintaining national peace, stability and development, and to promoting social prosperity and progress.
I reiterate my commitment to all initiatives and projects rooted in economic Pan-Africanism. I reaffirm my commitment to the multilateralism at a time when humanity is facing multiple uncertainties and serious threats that could endanger and permanently undermine world peace.
The ceremony was graced by foreign dignitaries, including Rwandan President Paul Kagame and Ghana's John Mahama. A Chinese delegation led by President Xi Jinping's special envoy Xiao Hong was also present at the invitation of the host. David Mbidi, CGTN.
To Benin now, where Romuald Wadagni has won the presidential election after securing 94.27% of valid votes, and that's according to the Constitutional Court's provisional results. Wadagni won in the first round against his main opponent, Paul Hongbe, who received 5.73% of the votes. The Constitutional Court reported a voter registration of over 7.89 million, with a turnout of over 63% for the April 12th poll. Wadagni previously served as Minister of Economy and Finance and played a key role in implementing current economic policies since 2016. In Benin, the president and vice president are elected through direct universal suffrage for 7-year terms. Mariam Chabi Talata, Wadagni's running mate, will serve as vice president. And to South Africa, where opposition leader Julius Malema has been sentenced to 5 years in prison. He was convicted of 5 offenses last October, including the unlawful possession of a firearm and ammunition, discharging it in a public space, and reckless endangerment. The charges were related to a 2018 rally for the Economic Freedom Fighters Party's 5th anniversary, where he fired an assault rifle into the air. Malema's lawyers said he would be appealing the decision, which prevents the leader from being imprisoned.
In respect of count 1, you are sentenced to a period of 5 years imprisonment. In respect of count 2, you are sentenced to a period of 2 years imprisonment. And therefore, leave to appeal sentence in this matter is granted.
She has granted us leave for appeal on sentencing and refused to give us leave to appeal on conviction. We must petition the High Court to appeal the guilty verdict and the sentencing itself. Today, because all they wanted was to have me sleep here for one night.
Over Nigeria, security forces are on high alert to avert a possible terrorist attack on public infrastructure in the capital Abuja and Niger State. And that's according to internal memos obtained from the Nigeria Customs Service by the Associated Press on Wednesday. The planned targets reportedly include the international airport and a prison facility in Abuja, as well as a military detention center in Niger. According to the memo, the attack aims to release detained terrorists and damage critical aviation infrastructure. The plan mirrors a similar attack in neighboring country Niger in January, where terrorists attacked military bases in Niamey and Tahoua. The conflict in Sudan has been called an abandoned crisis, with 34 million people currently needing assistance, according to the UN. It means that 2 out of 3 Sudanese require aid. But as CGTN's David Mbithi now reports, it's not reaching everyone, and when it does, it's in short supply.
As the fighting in Sudan reached the grim 3-year mark on Wednesday, little has changed for many displaced Sudanese. At the Al-Heshan camp on the outskirts of Port Sudan, families are still 1 meal away from starvation, and even tents are hard to come by, forcing them to survive in makeshift shelters.
My husband was killed in an airstrike in Babanusa. We need many things for the children. We need food and we need a tent. Life conditions are very difficult.
Hussein Mohammed Sharif is living with the scars of a bullet that nearly took his life. He lost 10 friends to this conflict that has changed his life in many unseen ways. But still, he is grateful to be alive.
I was in Omdurman and was shot by a Rapid Support Forces sniper. He was in a building, shooting and killing people. I was hit by a bullet and fell to the ground. I was shot on the right side, which caused paralysis.
According to the UN, at least 59,000 people have been killed since the start of the conflict in April 2023. In North Darfur, there were over 6,000 deaths over 3 days as the RSF captured the city of El Fasher last October. The war has pushed parts of Sudan into famine conditions, and many are desperate for the end of the fighting.
We are waiting for the war to end so we can return and live peacefully with our children and their father, and for the children to live in lasting comfort. This is all we hope for.
It's a hope shared by millions in the war-torn country who are still living a half existence 3 years on. David Midi, CGTN.
South Sudan is scheduled to hold its first post-independence elections in December. And as part of preparations, the UN mission there recently facilitated a symposium in the capital, Juba. The aim was to strengthen the country's electoral dispute resolution framework and build confidence in the legal system ahead of the polls. CGTN Sophia Shimachero reports.
South Sudan's general elections were originally scheduled for December 2024. However, the government announced a 2-year extension, saying it needed more time to finalize a permanent constitution, complete a national census, and register political parties. This marked the 4th time the country has extended the transitional period since the 2018 Revitalist Agreement was signed.
We need the permanent constitution, amendment of the relevant laws according to the agreement, so that in order to conduct free, fair and credible elections, for me as a South Sudanese national, I'm not in a hurry for these elections.
According to the UN mission in South Sudan, a strong electoral justice system is critical to protecting political rights and safeguarding the integrity of the process and outcome.
When citizens see that election-related disputes are handled fairly, transparently and efficiently, this can serve as a confidence-building measure, not just in the election process and outcome, but in the political and legal system in its entirety.
Experts say disputes are common during competitive elections and credible mechanisms are required to solve them. And building this is a shared responsibility.
An election dispute resolution mechanism is a shared responsibility. It does not fall on the National Elections Commission only. Among you here, Ministry of Interior, the police, and other security agencies, and the civil society in all its branches, like the media, like everything. We share in all this responsibility to resolve disputes.
But despite efforts to boost preparedness, UN officials say that minimal funding has been provided to electoral institutions and several security plans are still pending. There has also been concern over continued violence across the country. Still, the hope remains that rapid progress can be made so that the South Sudanese people can finally participate in the country's historic moment. Sophia Shimechero, CGTN.
More than 5 decades after it was built, the historic Tanzania-Zambia Railway is getting an upgrade. Built in 1975 at a cost of $406 million, the railway's $1.4 billion rehabilitation aims to restore its efficiency and regional importance. CGTN's Isaac Lukanda reports from Dar es Salaam.
It's been a long journey for Africa's 5th longest railway. After years of anticipation, the rehabilitation of the 1,860-kilometer long Tanzania-Zambia railway has finally begun. Officials say the 3-year program has commenced with detailed surveys.
The survey is important because this then becomes the input for the design, for the final design that will be needed to do the works. In Zambia, this survey has been completed. We expect the Tanzanian side to be completed by the end of April this year.
The rehabilitation project will pave the way for a 30-year concession under the Chinese contractor, the China Civil Engineering Construction Corporation, which will oversee upgrades before taking over operations.
In this concession, the concessionaire does not come and start working and running the trains immediately. First of all, he will rehabilitate the infrastructure. Then he's going to bring in new locomotives. He's going to bring in new wagons. Only then is he going to start operating.
The project includes upgrades to major stations as well as the procurement of 32 new locomotives and more than 700 wagons. Officials say this could increase annual cargo capacity more than tenfold, from about 200,000 tons currently to 2.4 million tons, boosting the movement of copper and critical minerals from Zambia to the port of Dar es Salaam. The start of rehabilitation works this year coincides with the 50th anniversary of the Tanzania-Zambia Railway. Officials hope that this latest rehabilitation will not only revitalize the railway, but also help define its next chapter, strengthening trade and driving regional integration. Chinese officials say its significance goes beyond economics.
70 Chinese experts, technicians, and workers sacrificed their lives on duty and were led to rest here, far from their homeland. They are heroes who built such a monument of China-Tanzania and China-African friendship, and will live forever in the hearts of the Chinese and Tanzanian people, just like the Tazara Railway.
Future plans could include extending railway connections further west, including toward Angola. But for now, the focus remains on restoring Tazara into a more efficient and reliable transport corridor. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Let's take a brief look into what's happening in the world of money. It's time for our business segment. Here are the headlines. Coming up, Kenya seeks World Bank support to cope with economic aftershocks of the Middle East conflict. And Senegal and the IMF inch closer to resumption of a lending program.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt,
along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome into our business segment. Kenya has requested rapid financial support from the World Bank to help manage the shocks from the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran. Like other nations that are heavily reliant on energy imports, the East African country is scrambling to stave off shortages of essential commodities, including petrol, while managing cost increases that could drive up inflation. Speaking on the sidelines of the International Monetary Fund World Bank spring meetings in Washington, Kenya Central Bank Governor Kamau Tuge told Reuters that the request for funds was significant without proving a figure. Rapid response support is an umbrella term used by the World Bank for its fast dispersing financial windows and policy supports that helps countries respond quickly to shocks or crises. The central bank paused its easing cycle at last week's meeting, opting to hold rates to assess the impact of the oil price shock. And the IMF has held positive discussions with Senegal this week on potential new loan programs, according to the IMF Africa Director Abebe Selassie. But more time and analysis are needed to come up with a plan to deal with a significant debt overhang. Senegal is in focus at the IMF World Bank spring meetings after the discovery of billions in undisclosed debt, now estimated at $13 billion, prompted the IMF to halt a $1.8 billion loan program in 2024. Selassie added that the country has been in talks on a new financing program with the global lender for some time now. Senegalese Finance Minister Sheikh Diba is at the Washington meetings for talks on a fresh funding program as the government faces a new wave of debt-driven pressure. Dakar's latest projections for the economy underline its challenges as the GDP growth is forecast to fall to 2.5% this year, down from 6.7% in 2025. Meanwhile, analysts at the IMF World Bank spring meetings have raised China's growth forecast to 4.4% in 2026, citing stronger than expected first quarter data. China's economic growth is expected to have positive effects globally, despite disruptions in the Middle East. And Jim Spellman reports from Washington, D.C.
Australians around the country are being warned fuel supplies will be impacted by that fire, but just how severely and for how long remains unclear. The fire broke out late Wednesday night at the Viva Energy plant in Geelong, Victoria, one of just two remaining refineries in the country. Early reports say equipment failure at the plant may be to blame, sparking several explosions. Now, there have been no reports of injuries and the fire has been extinguished, but the impact could be significant. That plant supplies more than half of Victoria's fuel supply and more than 10% of the nation's total. Production has resumed at a reduced rate after the fire hit the petrol processing area, and it comes at a critical time. Australia imports around 90% of its fuel, with supplies already tightening and prices rising due to the conflict in Iran. The latest disruption is amplifying concerns about how vulnerable the country's fuel supply really is.
Look, this is not a positive development in Geelong. Let's not pretend somehow that this won't have some sort of impact, but as I said, we will carefully, methodically manage it with the refinery. I and Viva will update Australians with the very best and latest information as and when we determine the full impact.
Despite shrinking reserves, Australia has so far resisted rationing. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is currently in Malaysia on a 3-day trip aimed at securing fuel supplies. Rag Navarro, CGTN, Sydney.
Libya's two rival governments have agreed to the first unified national budget in more than a decade. The African country's central bank says the deal will help end years of financial split and bring more stability. CGTN's Yasha Hakim has the details.
For over a decade, Libya has been wrecked by infighting and divided between two governments and armed forces in the east and west of the country. Even the state revenue was scattered between two separate and conflicting budgets, without any economic plan.
Having two governments in the east and the west led to a bloated budget with the necessary expenses from both sides. The budget was dispersed according to political affiliations rather than financial sense. There was no vision or plan. This damaged the economy, led to a budget deficit, currency weakness, job losses and inflation.
Mohammed Al-Atrash, whose company produces packaged food products and olive oil, says the recently ratified historic unified budget is a groundbreaker for the economy and private sector.
Having two budgets is harmful to businesses, as we have to deal with two contradicting entities in every step, two contradicting regulations, systems and processes. You cannot develop this way. For instance, how can we build an industrial strategy, vocational training, housing across the country in a modern, professional and scientific manner when you are divided? A unified budget will help kickstart economic reforms.
Over 95% of Libya's revenue is from oil exports by the National Petroleum Company. It delivers the revenue to the central bank, which then funds the government to cover salaries and expenses. Any surplus is provided to cities for services and developmental projects.
During the previous budget, our salaries were always late and there were no finances for infrastructure and other services. We hope the unified budget will regulate the process to get our salaries on time.
But there are still challenges ahead, mainly having to deal with two powers dividing the country.
There are ongoing differences on how much money will be directed for development projects in the East and the West. The central bank is planning the fiscal and monetary policies. The problem remains how we can have one budget without a unified government. Who will decide how much will be spent and where it will be spent? Who will monitor the expenditures? Who will be responsible for checks and balances?
Experts hope adopting a unified budget can open the door to achieve the long-awaited dream to elect a central government that restores unity, stability and peace to Libya. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
For years, African tour operators have built thriving businesses around affordable luxury travel to Middle Eastern hubs like Dubai, Doha, and Istanbul. But the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran is now disrupting this travel corridor, triggering cancellations and rising costs and forcing a strategic rethink across the industry. CGTN's Isaac Lukanda reports on the challenges facing a Tanzanian tour operator in Dar es Salaam.
For years, Skylink Tours has been at the center of Tanzania's growing appetite for travel to Dubai. But now, owner Mustafa Kato says bookings have dropped sharply, with many clients choosing to cancel or postpone trips.
As a leading travel management company, give option to our clients that there are other destinations and we've been actively promoting intra-Africa travel.
For many travelers, hesitation is being driven more by perception than actual risk on the ground.
You start saying, what if I go and I don't come back? Maybe I could get caught in a bombing at one of the hotels. Or what if I go and don't return or I run into problems? So I think those are some of the things that made me say, let me wait first, see how things turn out, and then make a decision about going later.
Industry data shows that more than 80,000 travel bookings were cancelled in early April alone, affecting routes between Tanzania and Dubai. Airlines, including Emirates, temporarily suspended some flights, while Air Tanzania scaled back operations, further limiting travel options. For a select group of Tanzanian tour operators, Dubai has long been a cornerstone of their business. But with bookings slowing and travel disruptions persisting, many are now being forced to adapt, either by diversifying destinations or rethinking how they sell travel altogether. Analysts say the impact from the conflict goes beyond outbound tourism.
Dubai is the main hub for global travel, especially for those coming to East Africa. Many travellers, apart from those travelling for business or other purposes, include people who go directly with Air Tanzania to India and Guangzhou, China. But for those who used to travel via Dubai, there has been an impact because there have been many cancellations along that route and many people have held on to or postponed their existing bookings.
In response, industry experts are urging operators to diversify, promoting travel within Africa and Asia while offering flexible booking options such as refundable deposits and date change guarantees. They also point to business travel as a more resilient segment that could help sustain the sector in the short term. For now, the future of this once booming travel route remains uncertain. Isaac Lukanda, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
The National Development and Reform Commissions on Friday held a press conference on high-quality development during China's 15th five-year plan period. The National Economic Planner highlighted key measures on infrastructure, domestic consumption, technology, and household income. It also vowed to increase the share of non-fossil fuels in energy supplies to ensure the country's energy security. Our reporter Liu Jiaxian has more from the conference.
The 15th five-year plan, covering from 2026 to 2030, is being regarded as a critical phase, building on the gains of the 14th five-year plan, and also to accelerate progress toward Chinese modernization. So here from the State Council Information Office, China has rolled out its economic roadmap for the first critical year of the 15th five-year plan period. China's National Development and Reform Commission Vice Chairman Wang Changling has highlighted four critical priorities for the 15th five-year plan. So first, strengthening the real economy and fostering new quality productive forces. This can be achieved by upgrading traditional industries and expanding emerging sectors and future sectors. Second, building a strong domestic market to boost effective investment and consumption, releasing the potential of China's supersized market. Third, addressing people's urgent needs, including those in childcare, elderly care, health care, and education. Well, indicators that will improve people's livelihoods now account for more than 1/3 of the country's plan's targets. And fourth, balancing development with security, ensuring food and energy supplies, but also guarding against the risks in emerging fields like artificial intelligence and data. Last but not least, officials say this steady start definitely guarantees for a strong foundation, but with outside external uncertainties rising, all eyes will be on how China navigates the rest of its critical first year of the 15th five-year plan.
Time now for our sports segment. Here are the headlines. Coming up in sports, World Athletics revokes 11 transfer of allegiance applications to Turkey, including 6 Africans.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa. So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Well, welcome into Sport on Africa Live with me, Richard Nta. We begin your sports with the decision by the World Athletics Nationality Review Panel to revoke the applications of 11 athletes seeking to transfer their allegiance to Turkey. Kenya's former World Women's Marathon record holder, Bridget Kosgei, winner of 6 marathon majors, is the biggest name on the list. The 26-year-old smashed a Tokyo course record when she blasted to victory in 2 hours, 14 minutes and 29